The first time I pressed the brake pedal that morning, nothing happened. Not a slow stop. Not a warning sound. Not even that little resistance your foot expects when the car begins to obey you. The pedal just dropped beneath my shoe like it had given up. My daughter Emma was in the back seat, wearing the navy dress I had ironed the night before, holding the folder her attorney told her not to lose. We were supposed to be at the courthouse in 23 minutes. She was supposed to testify, and if we missed that hearing, my family would get exactly what they had wanted for years: more time, more control, and another chance to make me look like the unstable one. I didn't know yet that my brother Ethan had made sure my car wouldn't get me there. I didn't know that the same brother my parents had protected his entire life had finally panicked enough to do something he could never explain away. All I knew in that moment was that my 8-year-old daughter was behind me, asking why I was breathing like I was about to cry, and I had to keep my voice steady. "Mom," Emma asked, "are we still gonna court?" I looked at the road ahead and gripped the wheel harder. "Yes, sweetheart, we're getting there. My name is Nami Carter. I was 29 years old, a speech therapist, a widow, and for most of my life, I believed my family was the safest place I had. That was the lie I was raised inside. From the outside, the Carters looked like the kind of family people admired. My father Richard wore pressed shirts even on Saturdays. My mother Grace remembered every birthday, every church fundraiser, every neighbor's anniversary. My older brother Ethan was the golden son, the one everyone said would carry the family name, and I was the daughter who was expected to be grateful, quiet, and easy to manage. When my husband Aaron died, Emma was only 2. I was young and terrified of making the wrong decision. Aaron had left behind a trust fund for Emma, not for me, not for my parents, not for anyone else. It was for her future school, medical needs, stability, the kind of safety he knew he might not be around to provide. I remember sitting at my parents' kitchen table 3 weeks after the funeral, while my mother slid a cup of tea toward me like she could soften anything with chamomile. "You don't need to carry this alone," she said. "Let your father and me help manage the trust." I looked at my father. He nodded slowly, serious and gentle. "It's not about taking anything from you, Naomi. It's about protecting Emma." Ethan leaned against the counter with his arms folded. "You're grieving. You're not in a place to handle legal and financial stuff." He said it like concern. I heard it as love. That was my mistake. So I signed the papers that allowed my parents to serve as trustees. They told me it was temporary. They told me I could ask questions anytime. They told me family didn't need suspicion between them. At 23, with a toddler asleep against my shoulder and a dead husband's wedding ring still hanging from a chain around my neck, I believed them. For years, I didn't question much. When Emma needed speech support, the trust paid. When she had dental work, the trust paid. At least that was what I was told. My mother handled the forms. My father handled the bank calls. Ethan always seemed to know just enough to make me feel stupid for asking. If I asked why a reimbursement took so long, he smiled and said, "That's how trusts work, Naomi. It's not a debit card." I hated how small I felt around him. I hated it more because part of me believed he was right. The first crack came on a Tuesday afternoon, not with a fight, but with an email. I was between clients when Emma's school sent a message marked urgent. Her tuition payment had not been received. If the balance wasn't settled by Friday, her place in the enrichment program would be released to another child on the wait list. I read the email 3 times. There had to be a mistake. The tuition came from Emma's trust. My mother had confirmed it 2 weeks earlier. I called her immediately. She answered on the 4th ring. "Naomi, I'm at the salon. Is this important? It's Emma's school. They're saying the tuition wasn't paid." A pause. Then a soft sigh. The kind my mother used when she wanted me to feel unreasonable. "Banks make delays. Don't panic," they said Friday. "Mom, then I'll call your father. Can you send me the payment confirmation?" Another pause, longer this time. "Nami?" she said, her voice cooling. "After everything we've done for you, are you really asking me for proof?" That should have been the moment I woke up. But old training is hard to break. I apologized. I actually apologized for asking where my daughter's money had gone. That evening, Ethan pulled into my parents' driveway in a brand new black SUV, the kind with leather seats and tinted windows. Emma stood beside me on the porch and whispered, "Uncle Ethan got another new car." My mother smiled like this was normal. "Your uncle works very hard." I looked at Ethan as he stepped out, sunglasses still on though the sun was going down. His business had supposedly been struggling 6 months earlier. My father had said the market was difficult. My mother had asked me not to stress him with family drama. But now Ethan had a new car, a new watch, and a grin that made my stomach twist. He saw me looking. "What? Nothing," I said. He laughed. "You always look like you're about to accuse somebody of something." My mother turned sharply. "Nami, don't start." I hadn't started anything. That was the strange thing about my family. They could hear rebellion in my silence. Later that night, after Emma fell asleep, I opened the small folder where I kept every document related to Aaron's estate. I had account summaries, old trust letters, school invoices, medical receipts. But the most recent full statement was almost 18 months old. I realized then that I had stopped receiving them. Not because the bank stopped sending them. Because my mother had changed the mailing address to my parents' house. My hands went cold. I told myself there was an explanation. I told myself families made administrative changes all the time. I told myself my mother was controlling, not dishonest. There was a difference, wasn't there? Then I saw one line on an old quarterly summary I had never noticed before, a transfer labeled Strategic Family Investment. $58,000. From Emma's Trust. I sat there at my kitchen table until the refrigerator hummed so loudly it felt like the whole room was vibrating. Emma's tuition was overdue. My brother had a new SUV. My parents had stopped sending me statements. And my daughter's future had a line item I didn't understand. For the first time in 6 years, I picked up my phone and typed a message to my mother without apologizing. "I need the full trust records by tomorrow." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then her answer came through. "Don't make this ugly, Naomi." The next morning, my mother never answered my text. She never called either. That alone told me more than any explanation could have. Grace Carter never ignored messages unless she was buying herself time. By lunchtime, I had checked my phone at least 20 times, hoping she would send the trust statements or at least give me some excuse that made sense. Instead, she sent one short message. "Come by for dinner tonight. We'll talk as a family." I stared at the screen for a long time. In my family, talk as a family never meant finding the truth. It meant deciding together why I was wrong. Still, I went. Part of me still hoped there had been a misunderstanding. Emma and I arrived just before 6. My father was already setting the table while my mother moved around the kitchen like everything was perfectly normal. Ethan walked in 5 minutes later, carrying an expensive bottle of wine and wearing another tailored suit that looked far too expensive for someone whose business had supposedly struggled just months earlier. My mother smiled the moment she saw him. "There he is, my hardworking son." Then she looked at me. "Naomi, could you help set out the plates?" It was a small thing, but it summed up our family perfectly. Ethan arrived as the guest of honor. I arrived as unpaid help. Dinner felt like a performance. My father talked about the weather. My mother talked about church. Ethan talked about a new client his company had landed. Every time I tried to ask about Emma's tuition, someone changed the subject. Finally, I put my fork down. "I need to see the trust records." The room became so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen. My mother slowly folded her napkin before looking at me. "Is that why you're here?" "Humma's school says her tuition wasn't paid." "It will be handled." "Then show me the payment." Ethan leaned back in his chair with a smile that immediately made me defensive. "You're acting like someone stole your money." "It's not my money," I replied. "It's Emma's." His smile disappeared for half a second before returning. "Exactly. And she's fine. She's about to lose her place in school. That's an administrative issue." "Then let me see the records." My father finally spoke. "Naomi, you're making this bigger than it needs to be." I looked directly at him. "Dad, Aaron trusted this family to protect Emma. I'm simply asking to see the account." Before he could answer, my mother interrupted. "Do you know how insulting this is?" I almost laughed. Somehow I had become the one insulting them simply by asking questions. "Mom, why won't you show me?" she sighed dramatically. "Because you don't understand investments. Money moves. That's how trusts work. Then help me understand." "You wouldn't." Ethan shook his head. "This is exactly why Aaron asked Grandma and Grandpa to manage everything." That sentence hit me harder than he probably intended. No, I said quiet. Aaron asked me. I asked Mom and Dad because I trusted them. Ethan shrugged. Same difference. No, it wasn't. Aaron had trusted me to protect Emma. I had trusted my parents to help me. Those were two very different things. Emma sat beside me quietly coloring on the back of a paper placemat, pretending not to listen. I hated that she had become so good at pretending. My mother suddenly smiled at Emma. Sweetheart, why don't you go watch television? Emma looked at me first. She always did. I nodded gently, and she walked into the family room. The moment she disappeared, my mother's smile vanished. This obsession needs to stop. It's not an obsession? You've been emotional ever since Aaron died. I blinked. That was 6 years ago. Some people never recover properly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My grief had just been turned into evidence against me. Ethan took another sip of wine. Mom's right. You've always struggled with stress. You're imagining problems that don't exist. Then prove me wrong. We don't owe you an audit every time you panic. I'm not asking for an audit. I leaned forward. I'm asking to see my daughter's financial records. My father rubbed his forehead. Naomi, enough. No. My own voice surprised me. Not this time. Everyone froze. I had never spoken to my parents that way before. My mother stared at me like I had slapped her. Excuse me, said not this time. Emma deserves answers. Grace slowly stood from the table. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. There it was. The sentence I had heard my entire life. Every favor came with lifelong ownership. Every act of kindness became a debt I could never repay. Ethan crossed his arms. If you don't trust this family anymore, maybe you should handle everything yourself. I'd love to, I answered. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. His expression changed instantly. For the first time that evening, I saw genuine concern flash across his face before he quickly covered it with another smile. It lasted less than a second, but I noticed it. Something about taking control frightened him. The conversation ended shortly afterward. My parents practically ushered me toward the front door without another word about the trust. As Emma and I walked to the car, she looked up at me. Yeah, sweetheart. Why does Grandma always get mad when people ask about money? I stopped walking. Why do you ask? Emma frowned as if she were trying to remember something important. Because Uncle Ethan asked Grandma for money all the time. She never got mad at him. I felt every hair on the back of my neck stand up. When did you see that? Lots of times? What do you mean? Last Christmas, and before my birthday, Uncle Ethan would go into Grandpa's office with Grandma. Then Grandma would come out with envelopes. She shrugged. I thought they were Christmas cards. I kept my face calm, but inside something shifted. Emma wasn't accusing anyone. She wasn't trying to solve a mystery. She was simply remembering what she'd seen with the honesty only a child has. That night, after I tucked her into bed, I couldn't stop thinking about those envelopes. Around midnight, I logged into the online trust portal using credentials I hadn't touched in years. My password still worked, but almost everything was restricted. Transaction history unavailable. Supporting documents unavailable. Trustee access only. I scrolled until I found one section I could still view annual balance summaries. The total balance looked healthy enough, but something caught my attention. According to the report, the trust had earned unusually high investment returns for 3 consecutive years. It almost looked too good to be true. The numbers were neat. Too neat. It was as if someone wanted me to stop asking questions the moment I saw the total. Then I noticed a small footnote at the bottom of the page. Additional investment records available upon trustee authorization. Trustee authorization. My parents had locked me out of my own daughter's future. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with overprotective parents anymore. I was dealing with people who desperately didn't want me looking any deeper. I closed the laptop, picked up my phone, and searched for the best trust litigation attorney in the county. The first appointment available was the following afternoon. I booked it without telling anyone. As I hit confirm, a notification appeared from Emma's school. Final tuition reminder. Payment due in 48 hours. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma sitting quietly at my parents' dining table, completely unaware that the adults around her were arguing over money that legally belonged to her. By sunrise, I had already made up my mind. For years, I had tried to solve every disagreement inside the family. I believed enough patience, enough understanding, and enough forgiveness could fix anything. But this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was documentation, legal responsibility, and a child's future. If my parents had nothing to hide, then an attorney would simply confirm everything was fine. If they did have something to hide, I needed to know before Emma paid an even bigger price. My appointment was at 2 o'clock that afternoon. I took an early lunch from the clinic where I worked and drove across town to a small law office with a brass sign that read Brooks and Sullivan Estate Litigation. It wasn't an impressive building, but something about it felt honest. There were no marble floors or oversized reception desks, just shelves full of legal books and people quietly doing their jobs. Olivia Brooks greeted me herself. She looked to be in her early 40s, calm, direct, and completely uninterested in family excuses. After introducing ourselves, she asked a question no one in my family had ever asked me. "What outcome are you hoping for?" I stared at her for several seconds before answering. "I don't want revenge. I just want to know if my daughter's money is still hers." Olivia nodded and opened a legal pad. "Good, then let's stay focused on facts." For nearly an hour, I explained everything: Aaron's death, the trust, my parents becoming trustees, Ethan's constant involvement, Emma's overdue tuition, the missing account statements, the strange investment entry. Olivia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands together. "Nami, trustees have what's called a fiduciary duty. They are legally required to act in Emma's best interest, not their own, not another family member's." "Can they refuse to show me the records?" "Not indefinitely." "Can they use the money for other purposes?" "Only under extremely limited circumstances. And every dollar has to be documented." I swallowed hard. What if it wasn't? Olivia looked me directly in the eyes. Then this becomes a very different conversation. Those words echoed in my head all afternoon. A very different conversation. Before I left, she gave me a list of documents to collect. Every old trust statement, every school invoice, every email, every text message mentioning the trust. "Paper trails matter?" she said. "Families lie. Records usually don't." Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't confidence. It was permission. Permission to stop doubting myself. Permission to ask questions. Permission to believe I wasn't crazy. That feeling lasted exactly 30 minutes. When I pulled into my driveway, Ethan's SUV was parked in front of my house. He was leaning against it with his hands in his pockets, as though we had planned to meet. My stomach tightened immediately. "How did you know where I was today?" I asked before I even got out of the car. He smiled. "Mom said you were acting irrational. I wanted to check on you. You followed me." "Don't be dramatic." "Did you?" His smile faded. "You're making a mistake. By talking to a lawyer. By dragging outsiders into family business." I crossed my arms. "Emma's trust isn't family business, it's legal business." He laughed quietly. "See? This is exactly why Mom worries about you." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make me sound unstable because I asked a question." He looked around the quiet neighborhood before lowering his voice. "You really think you're going to win this?" "Win what?" "Whatever fantasy you've built in your head." I stepped closer. "Then prove me wrong. Show me the records." For the first time, Ethan didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened ever so slightly. It was only a second, but it confirmed what I had started to suspect. He wasn't annoyed because I was asking. He was nervous because I wasn't giving up. "You should think about Emma," he finally said. "No, you're thinking about yourself." "Funny," I replied. I was about to say the same thing. He pushed himself off the SUV. "If this goes to court, the entire family gets dragged through it. Then maybe the family should have thought about that before keeping secrets." He shook his head in disappointment like I was the child in the conversation. "You're destroying everything Dad spent his whole life building." "I'm trying to protect what Aaron left for his daughter." "It's the same thing." "No," I said quietly. "It's really not." Ethan stared at me for another moment before walking back to his vehicle. Just before opening the driver's door, he looked over his shoulder. "You have no idea how much damage you're about to cause." Then he drove away. I stood in my driveway watching the SUV disappear until Emma opened the front door. "Mom," she called. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, sweetheart," but I wasn't. Ethan hadn't threatened me directly. He didn't have to. Everything he said carried the same message my parents had repeated my entire life. Stay quiet. Protect the family. Don't ask questions. That evening I began sorting through every box I had stored since Aaron's death. Most contained photographs, birthday cards, insurance papers, and medical records. Near the bottom of one box, I found a folder labeled Trust Correspondence. Inside were copies of letters from the attorney who created the trust. One paragraph immediately caught my attention. Aaron had specifically requested that any major investment outside traditional low-risk funds required written approval from Emma's legal guardian. I was Emma's legal guardian. I had never signed any such approval. My heartbeat sped up. I searched through every page again. Nothing, no authorization, no investment agreement, no explanation. Only Aaron's original instructions. Then another document slipped out of the folder. It was a copy of the trust's first annual report, signed 6 years earlier. Attached was a handwritten note from Aaron's attorney. Naomi, if you ever have questions about the trust, never hesitate to ask. Transparency protects everyone involved. Transparency. The very thing my family refused to give me. I scanned the report again until one signature stopped me cold. Mine? At least, it looked like mine. I stared at it for nearly a minute. The letters were almost identical to my handwriting. Almost. But one small detail was wrong. I always looped the letter N in Naomi. This signature didn't. My mouth went dry. I pulled out 3 old birthday cards I had signed for Emma over the years and compared them side by side. Every genuine signature had the same looping. N. The one on the trust document didn't. It was close enough to fool almost anyone. But not me. Someone had signed my name. I immediately took photographs of every page and emailed them to Olivia. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Naomi, she said without any greeting. Don't confront your family. Why? Because if that signature is forged, we need to preserve everything exactly as it is. Are you saying? I'm saying this just became much more serious than missing tuition payments. I looked toward Emma's bedroom where she was quietly doing homework, completely unaware that her future might have been stolen one signature at a time. Then another email notification appeared on my phone. It wasn't from Olivia. It was from Emma's school administration. The subject line read, "Enrollment cancellation notice." I read the email 3 times before the words finally stopped blurring together. Emma Carter's enrollment has been canceled due to non-payment. The school was polite about it. Professional. They even wished us the best. But every sentence felt like another reminder that someone had failed my daughter. I sat in the parking lot outside my office with my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Emma wasn't losing her place because I couldn't afford her education. She was losing it because money that legally belonged to her had somehow disappeared while the people responsible for protecting it kept telling me everything was fine. I took a deep breath, started the car, and drove straight to the school. Emma was finishing art class when I arrived. She walked toward me carrying a painting of a lighthouse, standing alone against a storm. "You're here early," she said with a smile. I forced one back. I wanted to spend some extra time with my favorite girl. She looked at me carefully. Children notice things adults think they're hiding. Something happened, didn't it? I crouched beside her. "We're going to figure everything out together." She nodded without asking another question. She had already learned that adults sometimes lied to protect children. I had decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. After we got home, I received another call from Olivia Brooks. Her voice was calm, but there was an urgency I hadn't heard before. "I reviewed the documents you emailed me." "Hond? The signature deserves a forensic examination." My stomach tightened. "So you think it's forged too, but think it doesn't match naturally. But that's only part of the problem. There's more." "Much more." She explained that while comparing the reports, she noticed something unusual. The trust's annual summaries referenced several investment accounts that weren't listed in Aaron's original estate documents. "That doesn't automatically mean fraud," she said. "But it does mean someone changed the investment structure after the trust was created, without telling me. Apparently." I stared across my living room where Emma was quietly reading on the couch. "Can they do that?" "Only under certain conditions, and every major decision should be documented." I never approved anything. That's exactly why I want to file a petition for a full accounting. I had expected to feel relieved hearing those words. Instead, I felt terrified. Filing a petition meant this was becoming real. There would be court records, attorneys, hearings. My family would know I wasn't backing down. Olivia must have sensed my hesitation. "Naomi, let me ask you something." "Okay. If Aaron were sitting here today and knew everything you've told me, what do you think he'd want you to do?" I closed my eyes. Aaron had never been confrontational, but he had always been fiercely protective of Emma. I could almost hear his voice. Don't let anyone decide our daughter's future except the people who truly love her. He'd tell me to keep going? I whispered. Then that's what we're going to do. The following morning, Olivia filed the petition requesting a complete accounting of Emma's trust. It was a simple legal filing, but it changed everything. Less than 3 hours later, my phone exploded with calls. My mother called first, I didn't answer. Then my father, then Ethan. Then 3 cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. Finally, my Aunt Linda left a voicemail. Naomi, your mother's devastated. She says you're accusing the family of stealing from your own child. Please call her before this gets out of control. I almost laughed. My mother wasn't devastated because I had accused anyone. She was devastated because a judge was about to ask the same questions I had been asking. That evening, I received a certified letter notifying my parents that the court had accepted the petition and scheduled an initial hearing. I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was who knocked on my front door an hour later. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't my parents. It was an older man I had never seen before. He introduced himself as Thomas Gallagher. I'm sorry to come without calling, he said, but I wasn't sure who might be listening. Every instinct told me to be careful. Can I help you? He glanced over his shoulder before speaking again. I was the senior accountant for Carter Development for almost 11 years. My heart skipped. Carter Development was Ethan's company. Why are you here? He reached into a worn leather briefcase and removed a small flash drive. Because I think this belongs with someone who still believes the truth matters. I didn't take it immediately. What is it? Copies? Copies of what? Everything I could legally keep before I resigned. My pulse quickened. Why would you do that? Thomas looked tired, like a man who hadn't slept well in years. Because your brother kept telling me certain transactions were temporary. He paused. Temporary turned into 6 years. I stepped aside and invited him in. We sat at my dining table while Emma worked upstairs on a school assignment. Thomas spoke quietly, choosing every word carefully. He explained that Ethan's company had experienced serious cash flow problems several years earlier. Banks had refused additional loans. Investors had pulled back. Yet somehow, the company always managed to survive another quarter. I never knew where the money came from, Thomas admitted. Not at first. When did you find out? When I noticed transfers coming through entities connected to your parents. He looked directly at me. Every transaction was labeled as an investment. Investment into Ethan's company. He nodded. That wasn't unusual by itself. Families invest in family businesses all the time. Then what was unusual? Thomas slowly slid the flash drive across the table. The source account. I looked down at the tiny piece of plastic lying between us. What source account? He took a long breath before answering. Your daughter's trust. The room suddenly felt much smaller. I couldn't hear the refrigerator anymore. I couldn't hear the clock on the wall. I could only hear my own heartbeat. Thomas continued speaking. I questioned it once. What happened? Your brother told me the trustees had approved everything and that it was perfectly legal. Did you believe him? He gave a sad smile. For then what changed? I asked to see the authorization. And there wasn't one. I felt my throat tighten. Why didn't you report it? He lowered his eyes. Because I convinced myself someone else would. His honesty hurt more than another excuse ever could. Before leaving, Thomas stood near the front door and looked back at me. There are emails on that drive. Internal accounting records. Payment schedules. I don't know whether they're enough to prove what happened. He hesitated. But they're enough to explain why your family is suddenly so afraid. After he left, I stared at the flash drive for several minutes before plugging it into my laptop. Hundreds of folders appeared on the screen. Bank transfers, internal memos, accounting spreadsheets, vendor invoices. Then one folder caught my attention immediately. Its name was only 3 words, Emma Trust Transfers. I didn't open the folder named Emma Trust Transfers right away. I just stared at it, my hand frozen over the mouse. For weeks I'd been chasing suspicions. One overdue tuition payment, one strange investment, one signature that didn't look quite right. But this felt different. This wasn't a clue anymore. It was the answer to a question I had been too afraid to ask. What if my family hadn't simply made bad decisions? What if they had knowingly chosen Ethan over my daughter? I took a deep breath and double-clicked the folder. More than 60 PDF files appeared on the screen, organized by year. Every file followed the same pattern. Money left Emma's trust through an investment account managed by my parents. Then, within days, almost the exact amount appeared in one of Ethan's struggling business accounts. Some transfers were $20,000. Others were nearly $80,000. Together they stretched across 6 years. My eyes moved from one document to another, trying to convince myself I had misunderstood something. Surely there had to be legitimate paperwork explaining why a child's trust was repeatedly funding a private business. I searched every folder, every agreement, every authorization. Nothing, only transfers. I opened one email dated almost 3 years earlier. Ethan had written directly to my father. "Payroll is due Friday. If we don't move the money this week, we're done." My father replied less than an hour later. "I'll speak with your mother tonight. We can't let the company fail." The next document was a transfer confirmation. $45,000 had left Emma's trust 2 days later. My chest tightened. I kept reading. Another email. "We'll replace the funds before NAMI notices." Another transfer. Another promise. Another delay, over and over again. It wasn't one desperate decision. It was a system. A routine. A plan. Every time Ethan's company needed money, my parents treated Emma's future like an emergency savings account. I heard footsteps upstairs and quickly closed the laptop. Emma walked into the kitchen carrying her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Mom," she asked sleepily, "are you working?" I forced a smile. "Just finishing something." She climbed onto my lap the way she used to when she was little. "Can we still go to the science museum this weekend?" My throat tightened. "Of course, even if school is being weird." I kissed the top of her head. "Especially because school is being weird." She smiled, completely trusting me to fix a problem she didn't even understand. After she went back to bed, I reopened the files. The more I read, the worse it became. Several accounting notes described the transfers as temporary bridge investments, but none of the money had ever been returned. Some files even included handwritten comments from my mother reminding Ethan to keep NAMI focused on Emma's therapy schedule whenever another transfer was made. I leaned back in my chair, unable to breathe normally. My own mother had planned conversations designed to distract me while they emptied my daughter's trust. The next morning, I met Olivia before work. I handed her the flash drive without saying a word. She spent nearly 20 minutes reviewing several documents while I watched every expression on her face. Finally, she closed the laptop. "This is significant." "How significant?" "Enough that we need to move quickly." "Can they destroy the original records?" "They might try." She immediately called a forensic accountant she trusted. His name was Michael Reeves, a certified forensic CPA with years of experience tracing financial fraud involving estates and trusts. By that afternoon, Michael had agreed to begin reviewing every transaction. "The first thing we need," he explained, "is to follow the money. Not just where it left the trust, but where it ended up." "Can you do that?" I asked. He nodded. Money always leaves footprints. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope. We weren't relying on family memories anymore. We were relying on bank records. 3 days later, Michael called us into his office. His conference table was covered with printed spreadsheets connected by colored tabs. Blue tabs marked trust withdrawals. Yellow tabs marked transfers through holding accounts. Red tabs marked deposits into Ethan's business. "I've traced 37 transactions so far," he said. "They're all connected." Olivia leaned forward. "How much?" Michael looked down at his calculator before answering. "Documented so far, $463,000. I couldn't speak. Aaron had spent years building that trust. He worked weekends. He skipped vacations. He turned down expensive hobbies because he wanted Emma to have opportunities he never had. Nearly $500,000 had quietly disappeared while I sat across from my parents every Thanksgiving believing they were protecting his legacy. Michael slid another document across the table. "There's something else." The page showed a series of repayments from Ethan's company back to an investment account controlled by my parents. "I don't understand," I admitted. "He paid them back." "Not exactly." Michael tapped the paper with his pen. "These repayments never returned to Emma's trust. They stopped here." He circled another account number. A personal account belonging to Richard and Grace Carter. I stared at the paper. "So even when Ethan paid money back, your parents kept it," Michael finished. Olivia looked at me carefully. "Nami, this changes the case." "How?" We believed your parents were protecting Ethan. Now it appears they were benefiting too." The room fell silent. My father had always hidden behind my mother's decisions. I told myself he was weak, passive, afraid of conflict. But these records showed something very different. He hadn't simply allowed it to happen. He had profited from it. That realization hurt more than anything Ethan had done. Ethan had always been selfish. My father had taught me honesty, or at least I thought he had. Later that evening, I received an email from the probate court confirming our preliminary hearing date. It was scheduled for exactly 3 weeks away. Attached to the notice was a list of witnesses each side intended to call. Olivia had already listed Michael Reeves. She had also listed Thomas Gallagher. Then I noticed one more name she had added: Emma Carter. I immediately called her. "Why is Emma listed?" Olivia answered calmly. "Because she has first-hand knowledge of conversations inside that house. She's only 8. I know. The judge may ultimately decide not to hear from her, but based on what you've told me, she witnessed repeated attempts to normalize the misuse of her trust." I closed my eyes. I don't want her dragged into this. Neither do I. But if the court determines she can provide relevant testimony in a child-sensitive setting, her voice may matter. I looked toward Emma, who was sitting on the living room floor building a puzzle, completely unaware that adults were now asking whether she might need to tell a judge what she'd heard inside her grandparents' home. I promised Erin I would always protect her. I just never imagined protecting her would someday require asking her to speak the truth about her own family. As I ended the call, another notification appeared on my phone. It was from my mother. "Family meeting tomorrow. Attendance is not optional." I stared at my mother's message for almost a full minute, waiting for the old version of me to come back. The version who would have grabbed her keys, driven over immediately, and apologized before anyone explained what I had done wrong. That version of me still existed somewhere. I could feel her panic in my chest, but she wasn't driving anymore. I typed back one sentence: "I am not attending any meeting without my attorney." My mother replied almost instantly, "Don't be ridiculous. This is family." I looked at the word family until it stopped meaning what it used to mean. Family had become the place where my daughter's tuition disappeared, where my signature appeared on documents I had never signed, and where everyone somehow expected me to be ashamed for noticing. I set the phone face down on the counter and tried to make dinner. 10 minutes later, my father called. I almost didn't answer, but part of me still wanted to hear his voice. Not the trustee, not the man whose name appeared on accounts connected to Emma's money. "My dad, Nami," he said quietly. "Your mother is upset. I'm sure she is. This could have been handled privately. I tried to handle it privately. You wouldn't show me the records," he sighed. "You don't understand how complicated this is." "Then explain it." Silence. I waited. My father had always filled silence with gentle lectures. This time, he had nothing. "Dad," I said, "did you know Ethan's company received money from Emma's trust?" Another long pause. "Your brother was in a temporary crisis." My body went still. Not denial, not confusion, not shock. Just an excuse. "So you knew." "We believed it would be repaid." "Was I told?" "You were grieving, then you were busy." Then his voice faded. "Then what?" Then it became harder to explain. I gripped the edge of the counter. "Emma lost her school placement." "We'll fix that." "With what money?" "Nami, please don't take that tone with me." There it was again. Tone mattered more than theft. Respect mattered more than truth. "My daughter lost something because all of you chose Ethan. Your brother built that company for the family. Aaron built that trust for Emma." He had no answer for that. When the call ended, I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear, from grief. It is a strange thing to mourn someone while they are still alive, but that was what happened to me that night. I mourned the father I thought I had, the one who taught me to return extra change at grocery stores, the one who made me write "thank you" notes, the one who once told me that character was what you did when nobody was watching. Apparently, when nobody was watching, he signed away pieces of my daughter's future. The next day, I didn't attend the family meeting. Olivia sent a formal notice instead, reminding my parents not to contact me directly about the trust without counsel present. That should have quieted things down. It did the opposite. By noon, my cousin Marissa texted me, "I can't believe you're suing your own parents after everything they did for you." Then my Aunt Linda, "Your mother is crying so hard she can't eat." Then a message from a number I didn't recognize. Some daughters would be grateful to have a family willing to help. I deleted nothing. Olivia had told me every message mattered now. Harassment also left a paper trail. Ethan was the last one to message me. His text came at 8:40 p.m. "You're making yourself look unstable." Judges noticed that. I read it twice, then took a screenshot. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell him that unstable people didn't create spreadsheets of stolen trust transfers. Unstable people didn't hire forensic accountants. Unstable people didn't protect children from adults who treated them like bank accounts. But Olivia had given me one rule: do not argue with people who may be investigated later. So I didn't respond. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she seemed quieter than usual. She pulled her blanket up to her chin and stared at the ceiling. "Grandma called the house phone," she said. I froze. I had forgotten the old landline even still worked. "What did she say?" Emma looked at me carefully. "She said you were confused." I sat on the edge of the bed. "What else?" She asked if I remembered things wrong sometimes. My stomach sank. "Did she ask you about court?" Emma nodded. She said grown-up problems are too big for kids and that sometimes kids make stories bigger than they are. I kept my face calm, but inside I felt something sharp and hot move through me. My mother hadn't just called to comfort Emma. She had called to shape her memory. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "you are not in trouble for telling the truth." Emma hugged her stuffed rabbit tighter. "What if Grandma says I'm lying? Then you look at the judge, or Olivia, or me, and you tell the truth anyway." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want Grandma to be mad at me." That was the sentence that nearly broke me. Emma wasn't afraid of court. She wasn't afraid of strangers. She was afraid of disappointing a grandmother who had already stolen from her. I smoothed her hair back and whispered, "Adults who love you don't ask you to lie so they can stay comfortable." She nodded. But I could tell she didn't fully understand. Maybe she shouldn't have had to. The following week became a quiet war. My parents stopped calling me directly, but relatives continued delivering messages on their behalf. Ethan posted cheerful updates about his company online, smiling in photos with clients as if nothing was happening. My mother sent Emma a package with a new dress, a bracelet, and a handwritten card that said, "No matter what anyone tells you, Grandma always knows what's best." I photographed the card and sent it to Olivia. Her reply came back fast. "Keep the package. Do not let Emma wear the dress to court." At our next preparation meeting, Olivia explained what the hearing would involve. It was not a criminal trial. It was a petition for accounting, removal of trustees, and emergency protection of Emma's trust assets. The judge would decide whether there was enough concern to order a deeper audit and restrict my parents' control. Emma might speak in a private setting or through carefully limited questioning. Nothing would be dramatic unless my family made it dramatic. "They will," I said. Olivia didn't disagree. 2 days before the hearing, Michael Reeves finished his preliminary report. The documented amount had grown. $478,000 had moved through accounts connected to Ethan's company and my parents. Some repayments had been redirected. Some records were missing. Several signatures needed examination. He also found something else: the trust had been used as collateral for a business line of credit. I didn't understand at first. Olivia had to explain it twice. Ethan hadn't only taken money. He had used Emma's trust to make his company look financially stronger than it was. If that credit line defaulted, Emma's trust could be exposed. I felt sick. "Can they still move money?" I asked. Michael looked at Olivia before answering. "Until the court freezes or restricts the accounts, yes." That night, I packed the hearing folder myself. Bank summaries, emails, screenshots, school notices, the forged signature, Michael's report, Thomas Gallagher's statement, Emma's limited testimony notes. I placed everything in a blue folder and set it by the door. Emma watched me from the hallway. "Is tomorrow scary?" she asked. I looked at the folder, then at my daughter. "A little. But we still have to go." I nodded. "Yes?" She walked over and slipped her small hand into mine. "Then I'll be brave if you are." I smiled even though my eyes burned. "Deal." I didn't know Ethan was sitting in his SUV 2 streets away at that exact moment. I didn't know he had already realized the court might freeze everything before he could move another dollar. I didn't know that by sunrise, he would stop pretending this was just a family disagreement. All I knew was that the next morning, Emma and I had to make it to the courthouse. I woke up before my alarm. The house was completely silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak of old floorboards settling in the early morning. For a few peaceful seconds, I forgot what day it was. Then I saw the blue hearing folder sitting beside the front door, and every emotion I'd been trying to keep under control rushed back at once. Today wasn't just another court date. Today was the day a judge would decide whether my parents could continue controlling my daughter's future. Today was the day years of lies would finally have to survive under oath. Emma was already awake when I walked into the kitchen. She was sitting at the table eating cereal while reading a children's science magazine, as if this were any ordinary Thursday morning. I envied children for that. They could still find normal moments even when the adults around them were falling apart. "Good morning," I said, forcing a smile. She looked up and smiled back. "Pick the blue dress," she said proudly. "You said blue makes me look brave." I laughed softly. "It does?" While she finished breakfast, I checked the hearing folder one last time. Every document was there. Michael's forensic summary, Thomas Gallagher's affidavit, Aaron's original trust instructions, copies of the suspicious transfers, the school's enrollment cancellation. Everything we needed. Olivia had told me 3 different times the night before, "Don't worry about perfection. Just get to the courthouse." Those words stayed with me as Emma and I walked outside just after 7:30. The morning air was cool, and the neighborhood was unusually quiet. Nothing looked out of place. My car sat exactly where I had parked it the night before. No broken windows, no flat tires, no warning signs. I helped Emma into the back seat and buckled her in myself. "Nervous?" I asked. She nodded. "Me too." "Is that okay?" I smiled. "Being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It just means you keep going anyway." She seemed satisfied with that answer. I started the engine, backed out of the driveway, and headed toward the courthouse. For the first 10 minutes, everything felt normal. Traffic was light. Emma quietly looked out the window. The radio played softly in the background. I even caught myself thinking maybe I had worried too much. Maybe today would simply be difficult instead of disastrous. Then I reached a long downhill stretch about 5 miles from downtown. The traffic light ahead turned yellow. I moved my foot toward the brake pedal. It went straight to the floor. Nothing happened. My heart slammed against my ribs. I pumped the brake again. Still nothing. The car continued rolling downhill, picking up speed. "Mom?" Emma's voice came from the back seat. "Why aren't we stopping?" I didn't answer immediately. My entire focus shifted to the road. There were cars waiting at the intersection below. A delivery truck was turning left. A school bus had just entered from the opposite direction. I grabbed the steering wheel tighter and pulled the emergency brake slowly, praying the tires wouldn't lock completely. The car shuddered violently. It wasn't enough to stop us, but it slowed us just enough for me to steer toward an empty gravel shoulder instead of the busy intersection. The tires bounced over the uneven ground before finally grinding to a stop against a low dirt embankment. Everything went silent. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely breathe. "Behind me," Emma whispered. "Mom." I turned around immediately. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears running down her cheeks. "No." I climbed out of the driver's seat on legs that barely worked and opened her door. The moment she wrapped her arms around me, every ounce of control I had been holding together nearly disappeared. I held her tightly while trying not to let her feel me shaking. "It's okay," I whispered, even though I had no idea if it was. A pickup truck pulled onto the shoulder behind us. A man in his 50s hurried over. "Are you two all right?" he asked. "I think so," I answered. "The brakes, they just..." He looked at the car, then back at me. "Don't drive it another inch." Within minutes, another driver had called 911. A sheriff's deputy arrived first, followed by a tow truck. I explained exactly what had happened while Emma sat inside the patrol vehicle wrapped in a blanket someone had found in the trunk. The deputy asked routine questions before walking around my car. A few minutes later, he called another officer over. Both crouched near the front wheel. They spoke quietly before one of them looked toward me. "Ma'am," he said carefully. "When was the last time this vehicle was serviced?" "About 3 weeks ago." "Has anyone else had access to it recently?" The question caught me off guard. "Why?" He hesitated for a moment. "Because this doesn't look like normal mechanical failure." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He stood up slowly. "One of the brake lines appears to have been cut." I felt the world tilt beneath me. "Cut, not broken, not worn out. Cut. I couldn't speak. The deputy continued explaining that the vehicle would need a complete forensic inspection before anyone reached a final conclusion, but his expression told me enough. He had seen something that made him suspicious. Olivia called while I was still standing beside the patrol car. Naomi, where are you? There was an accident? Are you hurt? No, Emma's okay too. I swallowed hard. The police think someone cut my brake line. There was complete silence on the other end. Then Olivia asked only one question. Can you still get to court? I looked at Emma sitting quietly inside the patrol vehicle. I looked at the damaged car. Then I looked at the courthouse skyline visible in the distance. Yes, I said. I'll find a way. The deputy overheard me. You have somewhere important to be. A hearing. He nodded once. We'll take care of the car. You shouldn't miss court because of this. Before I could thank him, another officer walked over holding a small, clear evidence bag. Inside was a short piece of black rubber tubing with a clean, unnatural cut through the middle. We found this underneath the vehicle, he said quietly. We're treating this as potential criminal damage until proven otherwise. Olivia arrived less than 20 minutes later and drove Emma and me to the courthouse herself. The entire ride, neither of us said much. Emma held my hand in the back seat while Olivia focused on the road. Just as we pulled into the courthouse parking garage, my phone vibrated. It was a notification from my home security app. Motion detected. I opened the video. The timestamp was from just before dawn. A hooded figure walked slowly past my driveway. The face was hidden beneath a baseball cap, but the person's build looked painfully familiar. Then, just before leaving the frame, the figure turned slightly toward the security camera. On the back of the dark jacket was the embroidered company logo of Carter Development, Ethan's company. I stared at the frozen image without saying a word. Olivia reached over, looked at my phone, and quietly whispered, "Don't show anyone yet." We stepped out of the car and walked toward the courthouse entrance. Through the glass doors, I could already see my parents sitting in the waiting area beside Ethan. None of them had any idea that what had started as a financial hearing was about to become something much bigger. The moment we stepped through the courthouse doors, I felt every pair of eyes in the waiting area turn toward us. My mother stood first. Even from across the lobby, I could tell she had rehearsed this moment. Her expression wasn't angry. It was wounded. That was always her strongest performance. If she could make herself look hurt, everyone else would stop asking what she had done. "Nami," she called, taking a step toward me. "Thank God you're here. We heard you were in an accident." Olivia immediately stepped between us. "Or Miss Carter, my client isn't discussing the case outside the courtroom." Grace ignored her. Her attention stayed fixed on me. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" I almost laughed. She hadn't called once that morning. She hadn't asked why we were late. She hadn't wondered whether Emma was safe. Yet now, surrounded by attorneys, court staff, and strangers, she suddenly looked like the world's most concerned mother. "We're fine," I answered calmly. "That's all that matters." Ethan remained seated for another few seconds before slowly standing. He wore an expensive charcoal suit and the same confident smile he had worn his entire life whenever he believed the room belonged to him. But something was different. His eyes kept drifting toward the blue folder in Olivia's hand. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the evidence. "Quite a morning?" he said with an awkward chuckle. "Bad luck, huh?" I held his gaze. "Maybe. Cars break down, sometimes. I'm glad nobody got hurt. So am I." For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled again, but it looked forced this time. "See? No reason to make today any harder than it already is." Before I could answer, the courtroom doors opened and the bailiff called the first group of cases inside. Ours was third on the docket. Olivia leaned toward me. "Remember," she whispered, "we don't need to prove everything today. We only need to show enough for the judge to order a full accounting and protect Emma's trust." I nodded, but my heart was pounding so loudly I barely heard anything else. 20 minutes later, our case was called. We walked into the courtroom together. Emma stayed beside me, holding my hand until the clerk directed us to our seats. The room was smaller than I expected. There were no jurors, no dramatic speeches. Just a probate judge, a court reporter, several attorneys, and a handful of observers. Judge Eleanor Watkins entered, reviewed the file briefly, and looked over her glasses. "This matter concerns a petition for a formal accounting, removal of trustees, and temporary protection of trust assets," She looked toward my parents. Or Mr. and Mrs. Carter, you currently serve as trustees for the minor beneficiary, Emma Carter. Is that correct? Their attorney answered. Yes, Your Honor. Very well. Petitioner's counsel may proceed. Olivia stood. She didn't raise her voice or make emotional arguments. She simply began with facts. Aaron's original trust agreement, my appointment as Emma's legal guardian, the responsibilities of trustees, the missed tuition payments, the refusal to provide records. Then she introduced Michael Reeves as an expert witness. Michael calmly walked the judge through charts showing money leaving Emma's trust over a 6-year period. Every transfer was matched with banking records leading to companies controlled by Ethan. Every number was supported by documentation. The judge listened without interrupting. My parents' attorney finally stood. Your Honor, these were legitimate investments made in good faith for the benefit of the trust. Judge Watkins looked at him. Do you have supporting documentation authorizing these investments? We're gathering additional records. Were these investments approved by the child's legal guardian? He hesitated. We believe trustee authority permitted. That wasn't my question. The attorney fell silent. For the first time since entering the courtroom, I saw uncertainty cross Ethan's face. Olivia introduced another exhibit, Aaron's original estate instructions. The paragraph requiring guardian approval for major investment changes was highlighted. Judge Watkins read it carefully before looking toward my parents again. Can either trustee explain why these instructions were not followed? My father slowly stood. He looked older than he had only a few weeks earlier. Your Honor, we believed we were acting in the family's best interest. The judge's expression remained unchanged. The trust exists for the child's best interest. Those are not necessarily the same thing. My father lowered his eyes. Then came Thomas Gallagher. He testified calmly about the accounting records he had maintained while working for Ethan's company. He explained how transfers repeatedly arrived from accounts connected to Emma's trust whenever the business experienced cash flow shortages. My parents' attorney tried to challenge his credibility, but Thomas answered every question directly. Did you personally move the money? No. Did you personally authorize these transfers? No. Then how can you be certain? Thomas looked directly at the judge. Because I was instructed to record them. The courtroom became noticeably quieter. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Olivia then submitted several internal emails. One of them appeared on the courtroom monitor. Payroll is due Friday. If we don't move the money this week, we're done. Another email followed. We'll replace the funds before Naomi notices. I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't need to. I could hear his breathing change. His attorney requested a short recess. Judge Watkins denied the request. We're continuing. Then something happened none of us expected. My mother suddenly stood without being asked. Your Honor, she said, her voice shaking. We never intended to hurt Emma. The judge looked at her calmly. Miss Carter, you will have an opportunity to testify when your attorney calls you. Grace ignored the instruction. Tears filled her eyes. Everything we did was to protect this family. Ethan's company employed dozens of people. If it collapsed, everyone would have suffered. The judge interrupted gently but firmly. Did you use trust assets intended for your granddaughter to support your son's business? Grace opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, she looked toward Ethan. He wouldn't meet her eyes. That silence lasted only a few seconds, but it told the courtroom more than any speech could have. Olivia slowly stood again. Your Honor, before the court decides today's petition, the petitioner has one additional matter to disclose. She handed a folder to the clerk. This morning, while traveling to this hearing, Ms. Carter's vehicle suffered a catastrophic brake failure. Preliminary inspection by responding law enforcement indicates the brake line may have been intentionally cut. Every head in the courtroom turned toward me. Ethan's face lost all color. Olivia continued, we are not asking this court to determine criminal responsibility. However, because the timing directly affected today's proceedings, we believe the court should be aware that a separate law enforcement investigation has now begun. Judge Watkins slowly removed her glasses. Is there documentation? Olivia nodded. Initial police report, photographs from the scene, and notice that the vehicle has been impounded for forensic examination. The judge accepted the documents without comment. Then she looked directly at Ethan for the first time that morning. He looked away almost immediately. I suddenly remembered the security camera image still stored on my phone, the jacket, the company logo. I reached into my purse and quietly handed my phone to Olivia beneath the counsel table. She looked at the screen, then back at me. Without saying a word, she understood exactly what I was thinking. The hearing wasn't over, not even close. The courtroom was so quiet that I could hear the court reporter's keyboard clicking between every sentence. No one moved. No one whispered. My phone remained on Olivia's table beside the stack of financial exhibits, the paused security footage still showing a man wearing a Carter Development jacket walking away from my driveway before sunrise. We both understood the video wasn't enough to identify anyone beyond doubt. The face couldn't be seen clearly. It wasn't proof of sabotage. But together with the police's preliminary findings, it explained why Ethan suddenly looked like someone who had forgotten how to breathe. Judge Watkins looked down at the documents Olivia had submitted regarding the break line before returning her attention to the trust case. This court will not speculate regarding any pending criminal investigation, she said evenly. However, I do consider it relevant that today's proceedings may have been interrupted by circumstances currently under investigation by law enforcement. Ethan's attorney immediately stood. Your Honor, we object to any implication that my client is connected to that incident. Your objection is noted, the judge replied. At this point, no such finding has been made. She closed the folder and looked toward Michael Reeves. Miserere. Reeves, I have one final question. Michael nodded. Based on your review, is it your professional opinion that trust assets were repeatedly transferred in ways inconsistent with the stated purpose of the trust? Yes, Your Honor. And approximately how much money have you documented? $478,341.17. The number echoed through the courtroom. My mother quietly lowered her head. My father closed his eyes for a brief moment. Ethan remained perfectly still, staring straight ahead. Judge Watkins turned toward my parents' attorney. Do you dispute the existence of these transfers? He hesitated before answering. We dispute the characterization of the transactions. Do you dispute the transfers themselves? Another pause. No, Your Honor. That single word changed everything. For months, my family had denied, minimized, redirected, and criticized me. Now, under oath, they were no longer denying the money had moved. They were only arguing about why. Olivia rose once more. Your Honor, the petitioner requests immediate removal of the current trustees, appointment of an independent professional trustee, preservation of all trust assets, and a complete forensic accounting. The judge made several notes before looking directly at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, do either of you wish to address the court before I rule on today's petition? My father slowly stood. His voice sounded older than I had ever heard it. Your Honor, I made mistakes. My mother turned toward him in disbelief. Richard. He didn't look at her. We kept telling ourselves we were borrowing the money. Ethan always said the company would recover. He swallowed hard. Every time he promised to repay it, we believed him. My mother shook her head. Don't say another word. But he continued. The first transfer was supposed to be temporary. He looked toward me for the first time all day. Then there was another. Then another. Eventually, his shoulders slumped. Eventually, we stopped talking about returning it. Tears filled my eyes, not because I wanted to forgive him, but because hearing the truth out loud hurt more than years of suspicion. My mother suddenly stood beside him. Richard, sit down. He remained standing. Grace, you're making us look guilty. He looked at her with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger, exhaustion. Because we are. The courtroom fell silent again. My mother's face hardened. She pointed toward me. She turned you against your own family. My father slowly shook his head. No. His voice was barely above a whisper. We did that ourselves. Ethan abruptly pushed his chair back. Enough. Every head turned toward him. Dad, stop talking. Then, you're making everything worse. He looked toward the judge. Your Honor, this entire case ignores one important fact. Judge Watkins nodded. Go ahead. Without my company, there wouldn't have been anything left for this family. He spoke faster now, almost desperately. Those investments weren't theft. They were temporary support. My business employed people. It supported my parents. I fully intended to repay every dollar. Olivia calmly responded. Intent does not replace authorization. Ethan ignored her. The company was recovering. Michael quietly slid another document across the table. Olivia handed it to the judge. Actually, Your Honor, according to tax filings obtained during discovery, Carter Development reported operating losses during the same years these trust transfers occurred. Judge Watkins reviewed the report. Mr. Carter, she asked, did your company have the financial ability to repay the trust? Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked toward his attorney, but there was nothing left to say. The financial records answered the question for him. The judge placed the file aside and folded her hands. The purpose of a trust is to protect the beneficiary. It is not to function as an unsecured line of credit for other family members, regardless of good intentions. She paused briefly before continuing. The documented evidence demonstrates repeated transfers inconsistent with the trust's stated purpose, inadequate disclosure, failure to provide requested accountings, and substantial concerns regarding fiduciary conduct. She looked directly at my parents. Accordingly, this court orders the immediate suspension of Richard and Grace Carter as trustees of Emma Carter's trust. My mother gasped quietly. The court further appoints an independent professional trustee effective immediately. All trust-related accounts are to be frozen pending completion of a full forensic accounting. No assets may be transferred, pledged, liquidated, or otherwise encumbered without court approval. I felt Emma squeeze my hand beneath the table. Judge Watkins wasn't finished. Additionally, certified copies of today's record, together with the preliminary forensic accounting, shall be forwarded to the appropriate authorities for review of any potential civil or criminal violations. Ethan's shoulders visibly dropped. For the first time in his life, nobody stepped in to protect him. No mother changing the subject, no father making excuses, no relatives telling everyone to keep the peace. Just facts, bank records, court orders, consequences. As everyone slowly stood, preparing to leave, a sheriff's investigator entered the courtroom carrying a folder. He quietly approached Ethan's attorney before asking to speak with him outside. Ethan looked confused, then worried, then genuinely afraid. Olivia leaned toward me and spoke softly enough that only I could hear. The trust case is over. She glanced toward the hallway where the investigator waited. But I have a feeling someone else's problems are only beginning. Walking out of the courtroom, I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt exhausted. 6 years of unanswered questions had finally been answered, but the truth didn't feel like winning. It felt heavy. Emma slipped her small hand into mine as we stepped into the hallway. Is it over? She asked quietly. I looked down at her and smiled for what felt like the first genuine time in months. The hardest part is, she nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. Children have a remarkable way of accepting hope even when adults are still trying to understand it. As we waited near the elevators, Olivia spoke with the court clerk about several administrative documents we needed to sign. Michael was already discussing the transition process with the newly appointed independent trustee. Everything suddenly became procedural. Inventory reports, banking restrictions, deadlines. The legal system moved calmly even when people's lives had just changed forever. I glanced toward the far end of the hallway and saw my parents standing alone. For the first time in my life, they looked small. My mother wasn't speaking. She simply stared at the floor while my father sat quietly on a wooden bench with his hands folded together. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. I assumed he had left with his attorney after speaking to the investigator. A few minutes later, my father slowly walked toward me. He stopped several feet away, almost as though he wasn't sure he still had permission to come any closer. "Nami," he said softly. I waited. "I'm sorry." Those were the words I had imagined hearing for months, maybe even years. But hearing them now didn't erase anything. It didn't return Emma's lost opportunities. It didn't restore Aaron's trust in the people he believed would protect his daughter. It didn't undo every family dinner where I had been told I was overreacting. It was simply the truth arriving much later than it should have. I know. I answered quietly, tears formed in his eyes. I should have stopped it the first time. Yes, he lowered his head. Every time I thought I'd fix it later, it became harder. That's what happens when people confuse silence with loyalty. He nodded slowly. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, I replied honestly. Because I'm not ready to give it. He accepted that without arguing. For the first time in years, he wasn't asking me to make him feel better. He simply turned and walked back toward my mother. Grace never came over. She looked at me once across the hallway, but there was no apology in her expression, only disbelief. I think, Even after everything the judge had said, she still believed she had done the right thing. In her mind, protecting Ethan had always been the same as protecting the family. She never understood that she had sacrificed one grandchild's future to preserve one son's image. As Emma and I walked outside, the afternoon sun felt strangely warm after hours inside the courthouse. Olivia caught up with us before we reached the parking lot. "One more thing," she said. "The investigator asked if you'd be willing to provide your home security footage." I nodded immediately. "Of course. They'll also want access to the vehicle once the forensic examination is complete." "Do they think they can prove who did it?" Olivia chose her words carefully. "I think they'll follow the evidence wherever it leads." That was enough for me. I had spent too many years watching people make accusations without proof. I wasn't going to become one of them. If the investigation confirmed what happened, then it would. If it didn't, I would accept that too. The truth had carried me this far. It could carry me the rest of the way. Over the next several months, life slowly became quieter. The independent trustee completed a full accounting of Emma's trust. Assets connected to the improper transfers were identified. Civil recovery proceedings began against multiple accounts. Insurance policies and business records that had never been disclosed were uncovered. Some of the money was recovered quickly. Some would take years through additional legal proceedings. But for the first time since Aaron's death, every financial decision involving Emma belonged to people whose only legal responsibility was protecting her, not protecting anyone else's reputation. Michael called one afternoon with news that made me stop everything I was doing. "Emma's education fund has been stabilized," he said. "She'll be able to return to her school next semester." I thanked him, hung up the phone, and cried alone in my office for nearly 10 minutes. Not because everything had been fixed, it hadn't, but because the future Aaron had worked so hard to build for our daughter finally belonged to her again. Emma returned to school that fall. On her first day back, she wore the same blue dress she had planned to wear to court. As I watched her walk through the front doors with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, I realized she would probably remember very little about the legal hearings when she grew up. She wouldn't remember banking records or forensic accountants or fiduciary duties. What I hoped she would remember instead was something much simpler. That when the people she trusted failed her, someone still stood up and fought for her. I eventually sold the house Aaron and I had shared. Not because I wanted to erase our memories, but because I wanted to stop living inside the hardest chapter of my life. Emma and I bought a smaller home closer to her school. Wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. It was peaceful. There were no surprise visits from relatives, no uncomfortable family dinners, no constant reminders to stay quiet for the sake of appearances. Just two people learning what safety actually felt like. I haven't spoken to Ethan since the day of the hearing. The investigation into the damaged brake line continued long after the trust case ended, and I let the investigators do their work without trying to control the outcome. Some people ask me whether I hated him. The truth is more complicated than that. Hate requires energy. I had already spent too many years giving him mine. As for my parents, they occasionally sent birthday cards and holiday letters. I read them once, placed them in a drawer, and never replied. Not out of revenge. Out of peace. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will happen on my timeline, not because someone tells me family deserves another chance. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see before. My brother didn't destroy our family the day my car lost its brakes. My parents didn't destroy it the day we walked into court. Our family began falling apart years earlier, the first time they convinced themselves that stealing from one child was acceptable because it benefited another. Every lie after that simply made the fall longer. Emma asked me recently why I never called Grandma anymore. I told her something I wish someone had told me when I was her age. Being family doesn't give people permission to hurt you, and loving someone doesn't mean you have to let them keep doing it. She thought about that for a moment before smiling and squeezing my hand. "I like our family better now," she said. "So do I. Because in the end, I didn't lose my family in that courtroom. I found the courage to build the one my daughter deserved all along. Sometimes karma doesn't arrive with anger or revenge. Sometimes it arrives the moment the truth finally becomes louder than the lies. And if you've ever had to choose between protecting your family's secrets and protecting your child, I'd love to know. What would you have done?